Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Bill Monty's Guide for Getting Older. I am, as you might have guessed, your host, Bill Monty. And as always, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for hitting that play button. You know, getting older, it's an interesting journey. Some days you feel wise. Other days you wonder where you left your glasses while they're sitting on top of your head. Yes, dear, I see them. But if we're lucky, age gives us something more important than youth ever could. We've kind of been touching on it the last few episodes. It gives you perspective. Now, over the last few shows, we've been talking about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, not necessarily from the standpoint of addiction recovery, but as a guide for living a more meaningful, peaceful, and honest life. Because the truth is, these steps are not just about alcohol or addiction. They're about becoming a better human being. They're about learning forgiveness, accountability, gratitude, about learning how to live with yourself and others in a healthier way. We've already talked about taking the moral inventory, making amends, cleaning up the emotional wreckage from the past. And if you tried them, if you just gave it a shot, those are hard steps. Maybe the hardest of the 12. But today we're talking about the final 3 steps, steps 10, 11, and 12. And these may actually be the most important of all, because they teach us how to maintain peace once we find it. Protecting your peace. Let's get started. Step 10. Continue to take that personal inventory, and when we are wrong, promptly admit it. Now that sounds kind of simple, doesn't it? But let's be honest. Most people do not like admitting they're wrong. In fact, some people would rather wrestle an alligator in the Everglades and say the words, "You know what? I messed up." But one of the greatest signs of maturity is the ability to admit mistakes without collapsing into shame. That is the key, my friends. A lot of us grew up believing that mistakes define us, that if we admit failure, somehow we become failures. But emotionally healthy people understand something a little bit different. Mistakes, they're not the end of your story. They're course corrections. And as you get older, being able to correct the course that you're on, it matters more than ever because relationships become more valuable to you. You do not want to spend years carrying resentment or stubbornness or pride over something that could have been solved with a simple conversation. Step 10 teaches us daily maintenance, not yearly, not after disaster strikes, but daily. Think about it like maintaining your car. You don't wait until the engine explodes to check the oil. You do small maintenance consistently so small problems don't become catastrophic ones. Emotionally, it works the same way. Did you snap at somebody recently? Did you act selfishly? Did you judge someone unfairly? Did you let your ego take over in a situation recently? Well, step 10 just says recognize it quickly and deal with it honestly. People who do this become easier to be around. You ever notice that? Yeah, some people age into wisdom. Others age into bitterness. The difference is often self-awareness. Now, the people who refuse to examine themselves, they usually end up blaming everybody else for their unhappiness. People who continue taking personal inventory, they stay emotionally flexible. They grow. They learn. And you know what? You might even find you sleep better. Seriously, no magnesium or melatonin required. Because when you stop carrying guilt, resentment, and emotional garbage around, life gets lighter. And perhaps that's one of the great secrets of aging well, learning what not to carry anymore. Now let's talk about step 11. Seek through prayer and meditation to improve conscious contact. Now, before you go hitting the stop button and changing the channel or looking for another podcast because I said the word prayer, stay with me. Because like before when we talked about it, this step is not about religion as much as it's about connection. Connection to something bigger than yourself. For some people, that's God, yes. For others, it's spirituality. We discussed this in the first episode, and I'd rather not beat a dead horse. So if you have not listened to that episode, I'll put a link to it. It's called A God of Your Understanding. I'll put the link in the show notes. Or just go and search the list of shows for A God of Your Understanding. The point of being comfortable with the higher power of your understanding is learning to quiet the noise. And boy, you got to admit, we live in a noisy world, Phones are buzzing, news is screaming, social media is arguing, everybody's angry about something. Sometimes it feels like peace itself has become endangered. Step 11 reminds us that inner peace does not happen accidentally. You have to, how do I put this? You have to intentionally create silence in your life. Now, meditation sounds intimidating to some people, and again, we've talked about it in previous episodes. Go find the book 10% Happier. You'll thank me, believe me. But meditation does not mean having to sit cross-legged on a mountaintop chanting for 3 hours. Sometimes it's just sitting quietly with your coffee before the day begins. It's taking a walk without headphones. Make sure you listen to my podcast episode before you take that walk, though. Sometimes it's fishing. Sometimes it's gardening. Maybe you just like watching the ocean like I do. Maybe you just like sitting on your porch listening to the rain. Meditation can be anything that allows your mind to slow down enough to hear yourself think. And as we age, this becomes really valuable. Because older age, it often brings reflection. We start asking bigger questions like, did I matter? Did I love well? What really matters now? And those answers rarely arrive while scrolling on your phone. They usually arrive in quiet moments. Step 11 teaches us that peace comes from intentional reflection and not constant distraction. I think one of the saddest things today is how uncomfortable people have become with silence. We feel like we have to fill every second with noise because silence forces us to face ourselves. But eventually, if you're fortunate enough to live long enough, you begin to realize that silence is not empty. It's kind of where gratitude lives. It's where you live. But to me, gratitude, that may be the greatest anti-aging medicine there is. Not physically, maybe, though stress certainly doesn't help, but emotionally. Grateful people seem younger because their spirits stay alive. They notice things. Everything from a sunrise to a grandchild laughing to an old song on the radio. Step 11 helps cultivate that awareness. It reminds us to stay connected to wonder, even in our older years, especially in old age. Let's move on to step 12. Carry the message and practice these principles in all our affairs. Well, welcome, my friends. We've made it to the final step. And this one, I think it's the most beautiful one of all. It's the one that says the ultimate purpose of growth is to give it away. In other words, help somebody else. That's it. After everything you've learned, everything you've survived, everything you've overcome, don't waste that. Share it. You know, one of the wonderful things about getting older, you become a living library. You carry stories, everything from lessons to losses to victories. Younger people desperately need perspective right now because this world is moving so fast that people often confuse information with wisdom. Wisdom only comes from experience. And those of us who are older, we have something this culture desperately needs: context. Come on, you've survived hard times before. You know life changes. You know heartbreak passes. You know trends come and trends go. You know what actually matters when the dust settles. And step 12 says, don't keep that wisdom to yourself, bud. And that doesn't mean preaching. Nobody likes a know-it-all. Sometimes carrying the message simply means living with kindness, being patient, being encouraging, being a good listener, helping without expecting applause. Because you know, when you're younger, success looks like accumulation, perhaps. Later in life, fulfillment comes through contribution, not accumulation that we knew in our youth. And there's a difference. You know what it is? Accumulation asks, what can I get? Contribution asks, what can I give? And the happiest older people that I know are usually the contributors. They mentor, they volunteer, they support others, they share their stories. Purpose doesn't retire. Yeah. You may retire from a job, but you never retire from being valuable. Honestly, I think a lot of loneliness and aging, it comes from believing your usefulness has expired. But that's simply not true. Your experience, your voice, your compassion, they all matter. And maybe the final lesson of these steps is this: life becomes more meaningful when it stops being entirely about you. And that might seem strange, considering we've been talking about a lot of these steps means looking at yourself, making yourself the focus of it all. But that's what I mean. This wraps it up here, doesn't it? Because we're taking what we've learned now, and now we know how to take it away from us, take the spotlight off of us and put it out there on someone else. Not in a self-sacrificing, unhealthy way, but in a connected way, in a human way. I like the idea of that. I hope you do too. I hope you've enjoyed this journey of the 12 steps. We're going to wrap all this up a little bit, and I'll give you some final thoughts in just a moment. I'll be right back. Hi, this is Bill Monty, and if you enjoy the podcast, sharing episodes, spreading the word, well, truly that means a lot, and it helps the show grow like you wouldn't believe. But if you'd like to support the podcast a little further, I ask you to please click the Buy Me a Coffee link that you can find in the show notes. Your support helps offset production and hosting costs so I can keep bringing you more stories, memories, and conversations in each episode. And besides, podcasting is a thirsty business, so I appreciate you filling my cup with some Joe. Hey, thanks for listening. Thank you for being part of the journey. And if you can, thank you for buying me a cup of coffee. All right, my friends, let's take a quick glance back at where we started from. What exactly are the 12 steps again? Well, number one, remember honesty. That's where it all begins. You have to admit to yourself whether it's addiction that you're battling or whether you realize you could fix yourself a little bit. It's honesty that makes you come to that realization. Honesty that maybe you're having trouble overcoming a problem. Step two is faith, that you need to accept that there's a higher power in the universe, higher than yourself. And if you want God or any higher power that you believe in to act on your behalf, you have to believe that it can. Step three, surrender. When you've accepted that higher power into your life, you need to welcome it by surrendering fully to whatever you believe they can bring to your journey right now. Step four was soul searching. That's the process just like recovery. There's no single moment that defines healing. Instead, it's a culmination of intentions. Step five is integrity. Step six is acceptance. You've got to accept that you can be a better person and that maybe you haven't become the person that you want to be. Humility. Step seven. Step eight, willingness. This is where we did that checklist. Who have we harmed in our lives? Reach out, see if we can make it up to them. Step nine, forgiveness. This is the moral inventory. This is the part where we look at it and say, where could I become a better person? Forgive people who have hurt you or you believe have hurt you in the past. More importantly, forgive yourself. Step 10, as we just talked about, teaches us to be honest, ongoing in our lives. 11 teaches us inner peace and reflection. And step 12, purpose through helping others. When we put all these together, my friends, they create something incredibly powerful. A life with less ego, less resentment, less chaos. And if you do it right, more peace. Now, none of us can do this perfectly. I certainly don't. But perfection was never the goal. The goal was growth. You finally realize life is not about becoming flawless, but about becoming more genuine, more compassionate and grateful, and maybe just a little wiser than you were yesterday. At least, that's where I'm trying to be. I hope you are too. If you've been enjoying this series of 12 steps with me here on Bill Monty's Guide for Getting Older, I do hope you have taken a moment to follow and subscribe and share the podcast with somebody you think might enjoy it. And if you haven't, please do that now on whatever platform that you use, because it really helps more people discover the show. And if you'd like to support the podcast even further, one of the best ways is simply to listen all the way to the end of each episode. Why? Because that shows the platform, Spotify, Apple, whatever it might be, it shows the algorithm that this is something you think is important. And when more people listen all the way through an episode, be it my show or someone else's, then they put that show in front of more ears and more eyes. All of this support means more than you probably realize, and it helps keep independent podcasts like this going strong. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like, you can also support the show through the Buy Me a Coffee support links in the show notes. Every bit truly helps offset production costs and keeps these stories and conversations coming your way. Because remember, getting older is not about giving up. It's about learning what matters most. I'm Bill Monty, and until next time, my friends, be safe and be kind.
If it's warm outside but you're feeling colder, not sure what to do without a friendly shoulder, you're not alone, so start feeling bolder. Welcome to Bill Monty's Guide for Getting Older.
Hi, this is Bill Monty, inviting you to take a talk down memory lane on the podcast Tales from South Florida, where we dive into the people, places, and events that make our corner of the Sunshine State unlike any place, anywhere. So sit back, grab your headsets, get a slice of key lime pie, and come along for the ride. Full episodes, music, videos, and more are available at talesfromsouthflorida.com. Tales from South Florida, where the stories meet the sea.